We're kicking off the Temporal Forces set review with Torterra EX. Torterra EX is a Grass Stage 2 Pokemon with a massive 340 HP and 2 attacks. Its first attack, Forest March, costs 1 Grass Energy and does 30 damage for each Grass Pokemon you have in play. Its second attack, Jungle Hammer, costs a Grass and 2 Colorless, does 150 damage, and heals 50 damage from this Pokemon. Now, Torterra EX can one-hit KO Charizard EX for just 1 Grass Energy. If you have 6 Grass Pokemon in play, if you have 5 Grass Pokemon in play, you're not actually. You're only doing 150 damage times 2 for weakness. That's 300 damage. And 180 damage is not even enough to knock out basic Pokemon EX like Miraidon EX. It's not enough to knock out Chien-Pao EX. It's just an incredibly mediocre amount of damage. And you have to have all 6 Grass Pokemon in play in order to do 180 damage. So in my mind, it just requires a lot of your deck to do a very middling amount of damage. You can one-hit KO Charizard EX. You can one-hit KO Roaring Moon EX. I mean, it's hitting for a decent weakness right now, and there's not a lot of great grass attackers in the format. I think that the Iron Leaves in the Future Box deck is going to do a way better job at fulfilling this role in the meta of one-hit KOing grass-weak Pokemon than Torterra EX ever will. Torterra EX does evolve from Grotle, which has the Sun-Drenched Shell ability, which allows you to search your deck for a grass Pokemon once during your turn and put it into your hand. So thankfully, setting the deck up should be a little bit easier than it would be otherwise. And you've also got the single prize Torterra with the Evo Press attack, which does 50 damage times the amount of evolution Pokemon you have in play for a grass and a colorless energy. So you could theoretically do up to 300 damage if you have 6 evolution Pokemon in play with Evo Press Torterra. In my mind, this card is just pretty mediocre, and I don't expect it to win any tournaments. I'm going to give this card a 3 out of 10, and I'm only doing that because it evolves from a Grotle, which is pretty good. Bramblegast is a really funny card. It's got 100 HP and the Weedy Resilience ability, which reads, for each prize card your opponent has taken, this Pokemon gets plus 50 HP. So that means if your opponent has taken 5 prize cards, this Bramblegast has 350 hit points and only gives up a single prize card. Its powerful Needles attack costs a grass and 2 colorless energy and allows you to flip a coin for each energy attached to this Pokemon, and it does 80 damage for each heads. So not a very powerful attack. I don't think this card will be better at stalling in standard format than Snorlax from the Pokemon Go set. Snorlax Stall has proved itself to be a serious control archetype in standard, setting up a stage 1 that only has a lot of HP at the end of the game seems not as consistently powerful as stopping your opponent from retreating altogether with Snorlax. In Gym Leader Challenge, however, this card could be a lot of fun. Since Gym Leader Challenge is a single prize format, your opponent will almost always have to get to the point where they have just 1 prize card remaining, meaning that Bramblegast will get to have 350 HP. And in Grass-type Gym Leader Challenge decks, you could play Rillaboom and Venusaur to pump energy onto Bramblegast. With Rillaboom, you can use its Voltage Beat ability, which allows you to search your deck for 2 grass energy and attach them to one of your Pokemon during your turn. And then Venusaur's Jungle Totem ability makes each of those grass energy count as 2 grass energy instead of 1. So with 1 Voltage Beat, you effectively have 4 grass energy attached to Bramblegast, and that allows you to flip 4 coins, averaging out at 160 damage, which one-hit KOs almost all threats in Gym Leader Challenge. I mean, a lot of Pokemon have about 160 HP or less, while having 350 HP at the end of the game. If you played this card alongside Kricketune, you can give it plus 40 HP, so 390 HP. And if you play it with a luxurious cape, that's 490 HP in Gym Leader Challenge, which is just hilarious. So maybe this Bramblegast could see play in a funny, tanky grass Gym Leader Challenge deck, but I don't really see it doing anything in Standard. For Gym Leader Challenge, I'm going to give this card a 6 out of 10. You could just play Hex Maniac to turn its Weedy Resilience ability off, and its attack is unreliable, so I think 6 out of 10 is fair. Before I get to the next card, let's hear a word from my channel sponsor, Dragon Shield. Dragon Shield non-glare sleeves are back. They come in 2 colorways, black and clear. The black sleeves are my absolute favorite for competing in the Pokemon trading card game. The sleeves have a non-glare front, which makes them look really nice on camera, and a matte back, which shuffles terrific. In my opinion, Dragon Shield non-glare matte sleeves have the best shuffle out of any sleeves on the market. They feel light and crisp in your hands, perfect to maneuver around, riffle, or mass shuffle. And they offer that premium protection for your favorite Pokemon cards that you've come to expect from Dragon Shield. Make sure that you only trust your cards to the best sleeves in the game. Head over to dragonshield.com today and place an order for some Dragon Shield non-glare matte sleeves. Huge thank you to Dragon Shield for being a continued sponsor of Tricky Gym. Scavillain EX is a new grass-type Stage 1 Pokemon EX with 260 HP and 2 attacks. Its first attack, Spicy Bind, costs a colorless energy and reads your opponent's active Pokemon is now burned. The defending Pokemon can't retreat during your opponent's next turn. Its second attack costs 2 grass energy. Two-Faced Crash, it does 140 damage, and you get to discard a random card from your opponent's hand and discard the top card of your opponent's deck. This card is just not particularly good at doing anything. It doesn't have enough HP, it doesn't do enough damage, and it's not quite disruptive enough to be a serious control card. So it is Bulk, 1 out of 10. Rabsca is a new bench protection Stage 1 Pokemon with the ability Spherical Shield, which prevents all damage from and effects of attacks done to your bench Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon. So it kind of combines the protecting effects of Manaphy and Jirachi into one single Pokemon. But Rabsca is a Stage 1, so it's a little bit more difficult to get into play. I think this card could see play in Standard format. It could also see play in Grass-type Gym Leader Challenge decks if Grass Gym Leader Challenge decks are worried about playing against spread decks. Rabsca pretty much solves that issue. So I think this is a good card that could see play, especially after Manaphy rotates out of Standard. Rabsca does provide a lot of protection. It will always be a meta call. It's not going to go in every deck all the time. But if your deck needs a lot of protection from spread strategies and doesn't have the luxury of bench space, then Rabsca fills that role perfectly. And because of that, I'm going to give the card a Standard 7 out of 10 and a Gym Leader Challenge 7 out of 10. Now, I know there are a lot of Incineroar fans out there. Incineroar is a very popular starter Pokemon, but unfortunately, I don't think this Incineroar is very good. It's got 320 HP, and the Hustle Play ability, which reads attacks used by this Pokemon, cost 1 colorless less for each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. And then its attack, Blaze Bomb, costs a fire and 4 colorless energy. It does 240 damage, and your opponent's active Pokemon is now burned. So effectively 260 damage. Now, my beef with this card is that Hustle Play can be played around. I mean, if your opponent has 4 benched Pokemon, then Blaze Bomb only costs 1 fire energy, which is really good. But your opponent has to have 4 bench Pokemon in play. And as soon as you put a Litten into play, your opponent will know exactly what you're doing. You are telegraphing exactly what your strategy is going to be. You're trying to use Blaze Bomb for just 1 fire energy. So they better not put 4 bench Pokemon into play. And if they only put, I don't know, 1 bench Pokemon into play or 2, then you're going to have a very expensive attack. If Blaze Bomb always cost a fire and 2 colorless energy, we wouldn't even be talking about this Pokemon because that's just not a very good attack. The only reason that anybody's talking about this card is because you could possibly use Blaze Bomb for just 1 fire energy, and since your opponent can very easily stop you from doing that, I really don't think that Incineroar EX is worth entertaining. When you're talking about Incineroar EX, you have to ask yourself, why would I actually play this card over other Stage 2 Pokemon like Charizard EX, which has a better ability and a stronger, more reliable attack? So that's kind of how I feel about Incineroar EX. Some people are going to want me to talk about Incineroar in the context of the new Relicanth. So let's mention that. Relicanth has the ability Memory Dive, which makes it so that each of your evolved Pokemon can use any attack from its previous evolutions. Incineroar EX does have access to both Litten and Torracat from Silver Tempest, which both have useful attacks. Litten's Reprisal attack costs 2 fire energy and does 20 damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon. So if your opponent were to swing into your Incineroar EX for 300 damage, then you could put Relicanth into play and use Reprisal for 600 damage. Wow. Torracat has the attack Gritty Claws, which costs 2 fire energy and does 40 damage, and it reads, during your opponent's next turn, if this Pokemon has full HP and would be knocked out by damage from an attack, it is not knocked out, and its remaining HP becomes 10. My issue with this kind of wombo combo, and that's exactly what I think this is, a wombo combo, and if that comes off as maybe sounding demeaning, that's because it kind of is. I don't consider wombo combos to be reliable competitive strategies. They're more wombo-y and combo-y. Torracat's Gritty Claws attack costs 2 fire energy, and the best way to accelerate fire energy onto your fire-type Pokemon is with Magma Basin, which places damage counters on them, which negates the whole effect of Gritty Claws, because Gritty Claws says that the Pokemon has to have full HP first. So you can't even combo Torracat with Magma Basin, which is going to be the most reliable way to accelerate energy onto your Incineroar. And then Litten's Reprisal does actually give you kind of an interesting punch that could do a ton of damage. However, if your opponent knows that you're playing the Relicanth and the Reprisal Litten, they can just soften you up for a little bit first and then finish you off with a big attack. For instance, if you're playing against a Giratina V-Star deck, maybe they hit you with Cramorant's Spit Innocently first and then hit you with Lost Impact instead of Lost Impact first and then Cramorant. And that's my problem with this entire strategy. You're just telegraphing exactly what you're trying to do and giving your opponent tons of opportunity to play around your strategy. And whenever you give your opponent that much power over what your deck is capable of doing, it is, in my opinion, a losing strategy. And for that reason, I'm going to give Incineroar EX a fraudulent 3 out of 10. You know what the best fire-type Pokemon from Temporal Forces is? It's not Incineroar EX, it is by far Banana Hat. Gouging Fire EX. This 230 HP ancient Pokemon has 2 attacks. Its first attack, Heat Blast, does 60 damage for a fire and a colorless energy, and its second attack, Explosive Fire, costs 2 fire and a colorless energy. It does 260 damage, with the drawback being this Pokemon can't use Explosive Fire again until it leaves the active spot. This card is just a stat powerhouse. 230 HP for a basic is big. 260 damage on a basic just clears every other basic Pokemon in the format, as well as some stage 1s too. And having access to a punch that can just do 260 damage is just a great asset for aggressive decks. Charizard EX decks could play Gouging Fire EX so that they can hit those one-hit KOs on basic Pokemon like Miraidon EX early on in the match. You could play Gouging Fire EX alongside Roaring Moon EX and power the card up with Seta's Vitality so that you don't always have to discard a Stadium if you want to do damage without damaging yourself. You could play it as its own deck with Seta's Vitality and Magma Basin, since both of those cards allow you to accelerate fire energy into play. I think there's a lot of potential for this card. It's just a really strong basic Pokemon, and we've already seen how powerful basic Pokemon can be in this format, with Miraidon EX kind of leading the charge, and then Roaring Moon EX starting to make waves as well. Gouging Fire EX is just another incredible basic Pokemon to add to the pool of playable cards. I'm giving this card a solid 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10 is what I would have given Miraidon EX as well. I feel like it's right in that realm of good basic Pokemon. It might not be a tier 1 archetype or anything, but I feel like we're going to be seeing Gouging Fire EX in competitive decks. It's just too good of a card not to. This Feraligatr is a funny dude. It's a stage 2 Pokemon with 180 hit points and the Torrential Heart ability, which reads, once during your turn, you may put 5 damage counters on this Pokemon. If you do, attacks used by this Pokemon do 120 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon during this turn. Its attack, Giant Wave, costs 2 water energy, and it does 160 damage, with the drawback being this Pokemon can't use Giant Wave during your next turn. Unfortunately, I don't think that stage 2 single prize Pokemon like this are playable in standard format right now. Standard format is just in a aggressive spot where streaming stage 2 attackers is not the easiest thing to do. Gardevoir is kind of the exception to this rule and not really the rule itself, since Kirlia is one of the most broken draw engines in the game. However, this Feraligatr does have a nice home in Water-type Gym Leader Challenge decks. Most Water-type GLC decks use some form of Rain Dance ability to rain water energy into play to power up very high-maintenance attackers like Wailord. But some Water decks opt for a more low-maintenance, low-energy cost strategy and use attackers like Palafin or Inteleon from Sword and Shield. Feraligatr fits into those decks really nicely, being able to do 160 damage for just 2 water energy, and then being able to boost up to 280 damage if you need to clear a really big threat like an opposing Wailord or Torterra or something like that. And I think that this Feraligatr will fit perfectly into those types of Gym Leader Challenge decks, as it is just a good attacker with good stats. So this Feraligatr gets a GLC 7 out of 10. Walking Wake EX is a new basic Water-type Pokemon EX with the Azure Wave ability. Damage from attacks used by this Pokemon are not affected by any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon. Its Cathartic Roar attack costs a water and 2 colorless energy. It does 120 damage, and if your opponent's active Pokemon is affected by a special condition, it does 120 more damage. So 240 damage. You can inflict poison on your opponent's active Pokemon with Brute Bonnet and an Ancient Booster Energy Capsule. So that ancient stuff kind of all going together. And Azure Wave makes sure that you can hit through all of those annoying abilities like Mimikyu and, Mimikyu. Just making sure that these kinds of wall strategies really don't have any legs in standard formats. Walking Wake does require a decent chunk of energy to get going. I mean, 3 energy. You could play it with double turbo energy, which will decrease the damage that it's dealing, but you kind of have to ask yourself, why am I going to play Walking Wake when there is Banana Hat that just does more damage and has access to Magma Basin? There is a new Stadium card that mimics the effect of Virbank City Gym. Classic Stadium in the Pokemon TCG, which does increase poison damage by 2. And then then there's the Radiant Hisuian Sneasler, which also increases poison damage by 2. So I guess it's possible to inflict 5 damage counters with poison now. Okay, hold up, wait a minute. Then all of a sudden this attack is doing 290 damage, and if your opponent doesn't switch out of the active spot, wait, hold up. Walking Wake is kind of broken. I think this card is pretty good, but the reason that I'm really interested in it is not really because of what Walking Wake EX does, but more so because of the poison options available in standard format. So I'm going to give Walking Wake EX a standard 5 out of 10. This new Raichu is interesting for lightning-type spread decks in Gym Leader Challenge format. Its Entangling Bolt attack costs a lightning and a colorless energy and does 50 damage to each other Pokemon in play with any damage counters on it, both yours and your opponent's. I think in standard format, if you want to spread damage, just use Sableye. Sableye is just better at it. But in Gym Leader Challenge format, every deck can't just play Sableye. So Raichu in Lightning type GLC decks actually provides a really strong sniping option. Lightning type GLC decks already have access to Tapu Koko with the Flying Flip attack, which does 20 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon, and Electivire from Brilliant Stars with the High Voltage Current attack, which does 50 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon. Raichu provides a really strong follow-up to both Tapu Koko and Electivire, dealing 50 more damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon that already has a damage counter on it. If you attack with Electivire, the Electivire gets knocked out. Then you attack with Raichu, that's 100 damage across your opponent's entire board. And it's a very attainable attack cost with the help of Flaffy and Electric and their Dynamotor abilities. You do have to watch out though, as Raichu can damage your own Pokemon if they have any damage counters on them. So it might be useful to pair Raichu with Rough Seas so that you can heal your own lightning Pokemon if your opponent tries spreading damage on yours. Just a thought. I'm gonna give this Raichu a solid GLC 7 out of 10. Wugwug. Wugtrio EX is a new lightning type stage 1 Pokemon with 250 HP, a little low on the HP side for stage 1 Pokemon that give up 2 prizes. It's got 2 attacks. Its first attack, Triple Pump, costs 1 water energy and allows you to discard up to 3 energy cards from your hand. This attack does 60 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon for each energy card you discarded in this way. And then Stun Hold costs 2 water and does 120 damage with the effect, during your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon can't retreat. This card doesn't really hold up on its own, but you could play it alongside Gholdengo EX as a possible spread attacker, since Gholdengo EX already plays a lot of basic energy and ways to recover them from the discard pile, as its Make It Rain attack does more damage for the amount of energy that you discard from your hand. And Gholdengo's Make It Rain attack doesn't specify that you have to discard metal energy from your hand. So you could play water energy and metal energy side by side. In fact, a lot of Gholdengo lists are already doing that to accommodate for Origin form Palkia V-Star, which has made its way into those decks. Wugtrio EX being able to do 180 damage to one of the opponent's Pokemon for 3 energy discarded is okay, but ultimately I don't think it's going to be worth the deck space. Just play boss's orders, right? And do the heavy lifting with Gholdengo, as you know, you usually do. Sliding a 1/1 Wugtrio EX into the deck doesn't really seem worth the bench space, in my opinion. So for that, I'm giving Wugtrio EX a fraudulent 3 out of 10. Evo Jammer saying, and nobody's setting up Evo Jammer, all right? You're not going to do it. There's too many basic Pokemon. There's too many basic strategies in the format. You're not doing it. Reuniclus is kind of a funny dude. It's got the Summoning Gate attack, which only costs 1 colorless energy and allows you to look at the top 8 cards of your deck and put any number of Pokemon you find there onto your bench. Doesn't matter if that Pokemon is a Stage 2, Basic, VMAX, V-Star, whatever. You can just put those Pokemon straight onto your bench, which is kind of funny. But funny doesn't mean good. If you're going through the effort of setting up Reuniclus, which is a Stage 2 Pokemon with only 120 HP, and then committing energy to that Reuniclus to try and summon more Pokemon into play. So let me get this straight. You have to get a Stage 2 Pokemon into play in order to get other Stage 2 Pokemon into play. It doesn't seem like the most consistent strategy in the world. So if you go through all of this trouble to use Summoning Gate, you better be summoning Exodia. And right now, that Exodia combination does not exist. But maybe one day it will. Maybe one day you can create some sort of silly Exodia deck that only works if you can get like the 6 perfect Stage 2 Pokemon into play. And the only way to get them all into play at the same time is with your broken Reuniclus. I really don't imagine that ever being the case. But, you know, maybe. For that reason, I'm going to give this card a standard 2 out of 10 in that it's just slightly more interesting than Bulk, and I'll give it a GLC 3 out of 10. Ribombee is a Stage 1 Psychic Pokemon with 70 HP and the Business Wages attack, which costs 1 colorless energy, does 30 damage, and if the defending Pokemon is knocked out during your next turn, you take 2 more prize cards. This attack and all attacks like it are terrible. And the reason that they are terrible is because the opponent can simply play Switch or move their active Pokemon out of the active. And as soon as that Pokemon hits the bench, this effect disappears. So your opponent would have to simply leave the Pokemon there in the active spot and just allow you to knock it out the following turn to take those 2 extra prize cards. And that kind of telegraphed play almost never happens in the Pokemon TCG because just retreat. This card gets a standard and GLC 1 out of 10. Fluttermane is a basic ancient Pokemon with 90 HP and the Witching Hour Flutter ability, which reads, as long as this Pokemon's in the active spot, your opponent's active Pokemon has no abilities except for Witching Hour Flutter. Its attack, Flying Curse, costs 3 colorless energy and does 90 damage and places 2 damage counters on your opponent's bench Pokemon in any way you like. This ability is not very good at stopping your opponent from doing things, but it does have its uses. Witching Hour Flutter stops Comfey from using flower selecting. It stops Cramorant from being able to attack for free. And it stops Radiant Charizard from being able to attack for just 1 fire energy. So for that, Fluttermane's Witching Hour Flutter actually does a whole lot against these Lost Zone toolbox decks. And unlike Klefki, it doesn't prevent all of your own basic Pokemon's abilities from working. So you could have a Fluttermane in the active and still use Rotom V to draw cards. You could still use Lumineon V to go search out supporters from your deck. And I do like that. So maybe Flutter Mane is seen as a tech card against Lost Zone Toolbox decks, as Escape Rope is going to be rotating out of standard formats, so Lost Zone decks will have less ways to push Flutter Mane out of the active. Flutter Mane seems solid, so I'm going to give it a standard 5 out of 10. I talked about it before in combination with Incineroar, but Relicanth is an interesting card. This effect has existed previously in the Pokemon TCG. It's never been amazing. It's always been kind of just okay. Most Pokemon V-Stars and most evolutions are just far superior than their previous evolutions. There are some previous evolutions that have useful attacks, but you could just attack with those Pokemon instead of attacking with the evolved form of it. So Relicanth seems a little extra in most situations. Like if you wanted to use Giratina V's Shred attack, just attack with Giratina V. You don't actually have to like attack with the Giratina V-Star and then use Relicanth just to use Shred. You could just use Shred. You could just use Abyss Seeking on Giratina V. There's no reason to crowd your bench with an extra useless Pokemon like Relicanth. I don't think this card will be making waves right out the gate, as there's not really a lot of uses for it right now. But maybe somewhere down the line when other cards get released and, you know, there's one thing that pops up and you're like, wow, it'd be really cool if I could use my Squirtle's attack on this crazy Blastoise EX. Maybe Relicanth will get used in that kind of way years from now, when everybody has already bulked it out. Standard 2 out of 10 and a GLC 2 out of 10. This glorified bulk, this is just slightly interesting bulk. There's a cute little Drillbur that's got the Dig About ability that reads, when you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench during your turn, you may search your deck for up to 3 basic fighting energy and discard them, then shuffle your deck. Discarding energy can be very powerful, especially when you're playing cards that allow you to accelerate those energy out of the discard pile, like Professor Seta's Vitality, or maybe you're using Koraidon EX to accelerate energy into play. So Drillbur is good at doing that. Specifically that. In the time since Battle Compressor was printed in Phantom Forces, they have never printed another item card as powerful as Battle Compressor. They've only given us things like this Drillbur. There was a Shuckle that did a similar thing, and of course the supporter, Professor Burnett, which was used in Lugia V-Star decks for some time. So I think Drillbur is interesting. It's not going to be in a lot of top tier decks, as it really only does one thing, but it does do that one thing well. And for that, I'm going to give Drillbur a nice solid 4 out of 10. In Gym Leader Challenge, there's no point. You could just play Battle Compressor. Oh my god, I can't believe we have to talk about Great Tusk again. This set contains 2 glorious Great Tusk cards. The first of which is a mill card. It's got the Ground Collapse attack, which costs 2 colorless energy, and you discard the top card of your opponent's deck. But if you played an Ancient Supporter card from your hand during this turn, you get to discard 3 more cards. There are 2 Ancient Supporters to choose from: Professor Seta's Vitality, which can help you stream energy to attack with your Great Tusk, and the new Explorer's Guidance, which allows you to look at the top 6 cards of your deck and put 2 of them into your hand while discarding the other cards. So all you have to do is stream attacks with Great Tusk every single turn, which you could theoretically do with Seta's Vitality and double turbo energy, and you get to mill 4 cards off your opponent's deck. With Ancient Booster Energy Capsule, your Great Tusk will have 200 HP, which is an annoying amount of HP for a single prize Pokemon to have. I think this strategy is very silly, but there is at least something cohesive there. Whether or not it will be good, yeah, I don't really think so. But there is something that deserves a fraudulent tier 3 out of 10. The second Great Tusk is more of an attacker. It's got 140 HP as well and 2 attacks. Its first attack, Lunge Out, does 30 damage for a fighting and a colorless, and the second attack, Angry Charge, costs a fighting and 2 colorless energy. It does 80 damage plus 80 more damage if your bench Pokemon have any damage counters on them. This could be a decent attacker in Earthquake fighting GLC decks. Donphan is a very popular attacker in GLC decks, doing 120 damage for just 1 fighting energy and dealing 20 damage to each of your own benched Pokemon. That could power up Great Tusk, and with just a double colorless energy or a twin energy and a fighting energy, dealing 160 damage is pretty solid. And with 140 HP on a basic, I mean, it's just kind of tough for the opponent to knock out with a stone fighting energy. It'll have an effective 160 HP. It's heavy ball searchable. Just kind of a fat dude, a decent attacker in fighting. So I'm going to give this card a GLC 5 out of 10. Everybody's favorite Pokemon, Gengar EX. Now, this dude is very popular. Gengar cards can very regularly go for hundreds of dollars. You know, the secret art rare versions and things like that. This Gengar has a nice artwork as well, but unfortunately, it is terrible. Gengar EX's Gnawing Curse ability makes it so that whenever your opponent attaches an energy card from their hand to one of their Pokemon, you place 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. Its attack, Tricky Steps, costs 2 darkness energy, it does 160 damage, and you may move an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon to one of their bench Pokemon. Whoo-wee! Yep, this thing is destined for the bulk bin. The things that it doesn't even do well, and the things that it provides aren't effective ways to win games. 1 out of 10. Farigiraf EX is a tricky fellow. It's got 260 HP and the Armor Tail ability, which prevents all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's basic Pokemon EX. Its attack, Dirty Beam, costs a Psychic and 2 colorless energy, does 160 damage and 30 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. I think this card could be useful in some situations, kind of like Alolan Vulpix V-Star was, right? Alolan Vulpix V-Star had its niche uses. It even won an international championship, but for the most part was not a meta-relevant card, as it could easily be countered, but it was good when the opponents didn't happen to be playing cards to counter it. I think Farigiraf is kind of in a similar boat, but in a weird spot since it prevents all damage done to it by your opponent's basic Pokemon EX, and then Roaring Moon just can use Frenzied Gouging to just blast straight through this thing, since Frenzied Gouging is an effective attack and not damage. There is the new Special Energy Mist Energy, which is worth talking about, though. It prevents all effects of attacks from your opponent's Pokemon done to the Pokemon this card is attached to. If you have a Mist Energy attached to your Farigiraf EX, it can't be Frenzied Gouging. I'm not a super big believer in walling abilities like this. It feels like the Pokemon Company is just always printing things that go through abilities like Armor Tail. I mean, just look at Walking Wake EX. It literally has an ability that goes through Armor Tail, and they're released in the same set. So, like, what's the point? And then Giratina V's Shred Attack goes through all effects on the opponent's Pokemon as well. So, I personally don't really believe in these kinds of abilities, as it seems like Pokemon is always trying to print counters to them without ever really letting them shine. This thing is smelling like a standard 3 out of 10. This new single prize Roaring Moon EX has caused more debate than any other card in this set review so far amongst the Twitch chat. A large portion of the chat seems to think that this card has a lot of potential, either as its own deck or as 1 to 2 of an existing Roaring Moon EX decks. The other half of the chat thinks that this card is bulk. I'll let you decide. It's an ancient Pokemon with 140 HP and the Vengeful Feathers attack, which costs 2 darkness energy and does 70 damage plus 10 more damage for each ancient card in your discard pile. Its second attack, Speed Wing, costs a dark and 3 colorless energy and does 120 damage. That attack is way too expensive. Nobody in their right mind will ever use it. So we're really just here talking about a basic single prize ancient Pokemon with 140 HP and a 2 energy attack that does 70 damage plus 10 more damage for each ancient card in your discard pile. There's the Earthen Vessel, there's Sada's Vitality, there's the new Explorer supporter. That's 3. You could put the Ancient Booster Energy Capsules in your discard pile. That's 4 different ancient cards. And then, of course, Pokemon like Roaring Moon itself. In my opinion, you're never really going to end up with more than a handful of ancient cards in your discard pile anyways. And if you build your whole deck to try and get ancient cards in the discard pile, you're really only going to be maxing out at about 200 damage, maybe at like the end of the game. So I don't really see this as a viable single prize strategy. It just kind of requires too much going on and doesn't do nearly enough. As a single prize attacker that's kind of fulfilling a similar role to Morpeko in current Roaring Moon EX decks, I think that Morpeko is just better. It's got free retreat and it passes your energy back. Roaring Moon does have more HP, and with an Ancient Booster Energy Capsule, it's got an annoying 200 HP, which can be difficult for Lost Box decks to deal with. And if you are able to get 4 ancient cards in your discard pile, you can even knock out a Cramorant. But my prediction is that this card is not going to see a ton of play. It might see play as a one-of in Roaring Moon EX decks, just to be kind of annoying against Lost Box decks. That's the only way that I see this card seeing any play. This card gets a rock-solid 3 out of 10 for standard format. Scizor EX. Dang, you know what? Scizor has been getting bulk cards for a long time now. Let's see if Scizor EX switches up that narrative at all. It's a stage 1 Pokemon EX with 270 HP and 2 attacks. Its first attack, Steel Wing, does 70 damage for 2 colorless energy, and during your opponent's next turn, this Pokemon takes 50 less damage from attacks. Its second attack, Cross Breaker, costs 2 metal energy, and you can discard up to 2 metal energy from this Pokemon. The attack does 120 damage for each energy card you discarded in this way. There are just way better ways to do 240 damage in standard format. I cannot in any way, shape, or form recommend playing this Scizor EX. If you had to play Scizor, you would play it alongside the new Metang that's released in Temporal Forces, but Metang is a good card. Don't spoil it by playing it next to a card like Scizor EX. This card gets a solid 1 out of 10 for standard format. Dang, Metang, your Metal Maker ability too strong. Your swag too different. This Metang is awesome and is honestly one of the cards that I'm most excited about from Temporal Forces. Now, just because I'm excited about a card doesn't mean that it's a 10 out of 10. It could just see some play. I just think this card is really cool. It's a stage 1 Pokemon with 100 HP and the Metal Maker ability, which allows you to look at the top 4 cards of your deck once during your turn and attach any basic metal energy you find there to your Pokemon in any way you like. And then you shuffle the other cards and put them onto the bottom of your deck. And it's that last part there that really makes this card cool, because if you have multiple Metang set up, you get to dig even deeper into your deck looking for metal energy. So if you have 1 Metang, that's the top 4 cards of your deck. If you have 2 Metang set up, you get to look at the top 8 cards of your deck looking for metal energy. If you have 3 Metang set up, you get to look at the top 12 cards of your deck and attach all of the metal energy you find there to your Pokemon in any way you like. And that's crazy. I mean, that's just a lot of dig. And I've never seen an ability in the Pokemon TCG that read quite like this. Typically, you get to look at the top cards of your deck and then attach energy to your Pokemon, and then you shuffle the rest into your deck. I mean, this style of ability has definitely existed before, but it's never existed in quite this same way. So I'm very stoked about this card. It's a great way to accelerate Metal Energy into play. Right off the top of my head, my mind is going straight to Origin Form Dialga V-Star, as Dialga V-Star is the premier metal attacker in standard format right now. It just doesn't really have a lot of ways to get energy onto it. You could use Metang to accelerate energy onto Origin Form Dialga V-Star, or maybe they end up printing a phenomenal Metagross EX one day or something like that. Metang can even accelerate metal energy onto Pokemon that aren't metal type. If you just need to get extra energy into play, Metang can do that. In standard, I expect this card to see some play. It won't be, an all-star right off the rip, but definitely a card with potential. I'll give it a 7 out of 10 in standard and an 8 out of 10 in Gym Leader Challenge. Finally, we've got some decent dragons getting printed in the Scarlet and Violet block. We're going to start things off with Koraidon, a single prize Pokemon with 140 HP, and the Primeval Battering attack, which costs a fighting and a colorless energy and does 30 damage for each of your ancient Pokemon in play. Its second attack, Shred, costs a fighting, a fire, and a colorless energy and does 130 damage. It goes through all effects on your opponent's active Pokemon. This Koraidon is just a better single prize attacker than that ancient Roaring Moon is. It could deal 180 damage if you have 6 ancient Pokemon in play, which seems fine. Can do 130 damage for 3 energy. I don't even think this card's worth talking about, bro. I think we just skip it. Ancient Box is not a thing. Stop trying to make Ancient Box a thing. Ancient Box isn't a thing. Listen, Future Box is a thing. Future Box has this card. Just let them play the dinosaurs, man. Dino Box? Oh, man, and we're calling it Dino Box? Okay, all right, I guess there's this idea that maybe you can play all of these little ancient guys together and you can outfit them all with ancient booster energy capsules, giving them all like 200 HP, which is a lot of HP for a basic Pokemon that only gives up 1 prize card. After all, if you have 6 ancient Pokemon in play, and if you're playing the Ancient Toolbox deck, then I suppose maybe that's what you're aiming to try and do. But keep in mind, Battle VIP Pass does not exist anymore. Primeval Battering could do 180 damage for just 2 energy, which does 2-hit KO most things in standard format. So that's okay. But it's only hitting those numbers if you have a completely full bench. And in order to power up Koraidon, you're going to need to play Professor Seta's Vitality pretty often because your single prize Pokemon are going to be getting knocked out. Twitch chat has been calling this deck the Dino Box, and at least it has a fun name. Sorry, Koraidon, you're getting a standard 3 out of 10. To go with our baby Koraidon, there's a big boy, Koraidon EX, a dragon type basic Pokemon with 230 HP and 2 attacks. Its first attack, Vengeful Hammer, costs 2 colorless energy and does 20 damage plus 10 more damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon. Its second attack, Kaiser Tackle, costs a fire and 2 fighting energy, and it does 280 damage, with the drawback being that this Pokemon does 60 damage to itself. If you are on board with the Dino Box, the ancient toolbox deck, maybe this card slides into that deck as a way to actually do some real damage, because every other ancient Pokemon that we've talked about so far isn't really doing real damage. But 280 damage, you know what? Those are some real numbers. So that's fine. This Pokemon does do 60 damage to itself though, which is not great. If this Pokemon has an Ancient Booster Energy Capsule attached to it, it'll have 290 HP, and then the Kaiser Tackle attack does basically nullify that, bringing it back down to 230 HP. And if your opponent is silly enough to hit into this thing without actually knocking it out, they will have to deal with the Vengeful Hammer, dealing, a lot of damage in return. I don't think that this card is anything special. I still think that Gouging Fire is it Gouging Fire? I still think that Banana Hat is the strongest of these ancient basics that we've seen in this set, and that's because it can be played with the fire support that already exists in Standard. So I'm giving this Koraidon EX a standard 3 out of 10. Heck yeah, I'll build an ancient box for tabletop. Sure, I'll build it. All right, I'ma build it. This card's bad. I'm dunking on it. This card is like a 2, bro. Raging Bulk. After reviewing Raging Bolt EX, some people are gonna say that I'm just a hater of these new ancient Pokemon. And to that, I'd say, you're mostly right, except for Banana Hat. Banana Hat gets the pass, everything else is total garbage. Raging Bolt EX is a basic Dragon-type Pokemon with 240 HP. Wow. And it's got 2 attacks. Its first attack, Bursting Roar, costs 1 colorless energy, and you discard your hand and draw 6 cards. Its second attack, Climactic Descent, costs a lightning and a fighting, and you can discard any amount of basic energy from your Pokemon. The attack does 70 damage for each card you discarded in this way. This card is just a weaker Chien-Pao EX. If you want an attack that does a lot of damage for discarding energy, just play Baxcalibur with Chien-Pao. Baxcalibur allows you to put as many water energy into play as you like during your turn, and you don't have to play a supporter card that only draws 3 cards when you do that. Baxcalibur Chien-Pao is already just a fine deck in Standard format, and I don't really foresee Raging Bolt EX overtaking Baxcalibur with Chien-Pao anytime soon. Now, of course, there are some other ways to get energy into play for your Raging Bolt EX other than Professor Seta's Vitality. You could play it alongside Sandy Shocks EX, which brings a fighting energy back from the discard pile if your opponent has already taken 2 prize cards. So the game has to effectively be a third of the way over in order for Sandy Shocks to start doing anything. And then if you try to slide Raging Bolt EX into your Dinobox deck, I just feel like you're not gonna really have enough board presence or energy stability in order to reliably use this attack to take big game-winning knockouts, as your ancient Pokemon are probably going to be getting knocked out pretty consistently. Raging Bolt EX just seems like a card that's way too high maintenance to bother building a deck around. I think Gholdengo EX and Chien-Pao Baxcalibur both do this strategy way more effectively. So Raging Bolt EX is a fraud tier 3 out of 10. As much hating as I did on some of the ancient toolbox strategies coming out in Temporal Forces, I am very excited about the new future cards, as I think it's a promising new archetype. It seems like it has a lot of potential in our upcoming Standard format. The backbone of the deck, in my opinion, is a combination of Miraidon and Iron Crown EX. So we'll start off with those two. Miraidon is a basic single prize Pokemon with 110 HP and 2 attacks. Its first attack, Accelerating Peak, does 40 damage, and you get to search your deck for up to 2 basic energy cards and attach them to your future Pokemon in any way you like. Its second attack, Sparking Strike, costs 2 lightning and a psychic and does 160 damage. In order to talk about the future Pokemon from the set, I think you kind of have to look at Miraidon and Iron Crown, so I'm going to read off Iron Crown EX real quick as well. It's a 220 hit point basic Pokemon with the ability Cobalt Command, which makes it so that your future Pokemon's attacks, except any Iron Crown EX, do 20 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. And this ability stacks, so for each Iron Crown EX you have in play, your future Pokemon are going to be dealing 20 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon, going all the way up to 80 additional damage if you have 4 Iron Crown EX in play, And with a Future Booster Energy Capsule, that is a potential plus 100 damage for any of your attacks. So with that context, Miraidon can use Accelerating Peak on the first turn of the game to do up to 140 damage while searching your deck for 2 basic energy and attaching them to your future Pokemon in any way you like. If you need any proof of how good it is to do over 100 damage with a single prize Pokemon on the first turn of the game, just look at Lost Box. Cramorant's Spit Innocently attack has helped define standard format, as Lost Box decks can always take a turn 1 knockout going second. And I think that these new future decks are going to occupy a similarly aggressive space with a very easy to launch, low energy cost attack that is going to be used on the first turn of the game. Future Pokemon also have Techno Radar to flood the board with future Pokemon as early as turn 1, which is going to make it very easy to go get those Iron Crowns and Miraidons and any other Pokemon that you want in play. Future Booster Energy Capsule not only boosts your future Pokemon's damage by 20, but it also gives them free retreats, which makes it very easy to get a Miraidon into the active spot on the first turn of the game to use Accelerating Peak. It seems pretty reasonable to use Miraidon on the first couple turns of the game to accelerate energy into play, and then if you want to, you can transition to its Sparkling Strike attack, which does base 160 damage with Iron Crown and Future Booster Energy Capsule. It can do up to 260 damage. Just ridiculous numbers for a single prize Pokemon to hit. I think that this Future Toolbox deck is the real deal in standard formats, and this Miraidon is the backbone of the archetype. I'm giving the Miraidon a standard 9 out of 10. What's funny is you could also play this card in GLC. Dragon decks are kind of starving for some new dragon Pokemon to play. You can only use Accelerating Peak to accelerate energy onto itself, but 3 energy for 160 damage is not bad. It doesn't necessarily gel with the other energy types in Dragon GLC decks right now, so I'm going to give this thing a GLC 5 out of 10. Iron Crown EX is just a phenomenal damage buff. We've seen this kind of damage boosting ability before. The Plasma archetype from way back in the Black and White era is very reminiscent of this new Future Toolbox deck. Iron Crown EX does have an attack, Twin Shottles, for Psychic and 2 colorless energy. Does 50 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. Kind of a mid attack. You're not going to be using it too much, I don't think, but you could if the situation called for it. The Future Toolbox deck isn't nearly as potent without Iron Crown EX. I'm giving this card a standard 9 out of 10. One of the biggest attackers for the Future Toolbox deck is Miraidon EX, a Dragon-type basic Pokemon with 220 HP and 2 attacks. Its first attack, Repulsion Bolt, costs a Lightning and a Psychic energy, and does 60 damage plus 100 more damage if your opponent's active Pokemon already has any damage counters on it. And then its second attack, Cyber Drive, costs a Lightning, a Psychic, and a Colorless, and it does 220 damage, with the drawback being, during your next turn, this Pokemon cannot use Cyber Drive. 220 can ramp up to 320 if you have 4 Iron Crown and a Future Booster Energy Capsule attached to Miraidon EX. So just a great way to deal a lot of damage. If you need to knock out a Giratina V-Star or an Arceus V-Star, Miraidon EX is probably going to be the go-to Pokemon to do that, as it only needs 3 damage buffs, so like 2 Iron Crown and a Future Booster Energy Capsule, to deal 280 damage for just 3 energy. Think about the amount of effort that goes into making a Giratina V-Star do 280 damage with Lost Impact. Miraidon EX is a basic that can do 280 damage much easier, in my opinion, as all you need to do is use Miraidon to accelerate 2 energy to your Miraidon EX turn 1, and then turn 2, if you have 2 Iron Crown and a Future Booster Energy Capsule attached to your Miraidon EX, that's a turn 2 280 damage. you can kind of see the future deck taking shape right here. I mean, it's all right here, and it has all of the pieces necessary to be a hard-hitting, fast, aggressive meta archetype. And Miraidon EX plays a big part of that. Miraidon EX is really good and kind of the standard damage output for the Future Toolbox deck. I'll give it an 8 out of 10. Charizard EX is proving to be one of the most popular decks in standard formats. It has a massive 330 HP and is tough to knock out, but not for Iron Leaves EX, a grass-type future Pokemon with the Rapid Vernier ability, which allows you to switch this Pokemon into the active spot when you play it from your hand to the bench and move any number of energy from your bench Pokemon to this Pokemon when you do. It's got the Prismatic Edge attack, which costs 2 grass and a colorless energy and does 180 damage with the drawback. During your next turn, this Pokemon cannot attack. So this thing instantly one-hit KOs Charizard EX, and you can drop it out of nowhere, swing all your energy in play onto it to take a big KO on grass-weak Pokemon like Charizard EX or Roaring Moon EX. This is definitely a useful asset for the future Toolbox decks to have, and I think is really strong, especially considering the new future Ace spec, which I'm going to be talking about soon. Iron Leaves EX gets a 7 out of 10 from me. Great for knocking out grass-weak Pokemon, but if there aren't any grass-weak Pokemon that you need to knock out, then there's really no reason to play it. Iron Boulder EX is my favorite of the future Paradox Pokemon, but unfortunately, I think it is the worst of the cards. It's got 240 HP, which is big for future Pokemon. Usually the future Pokemon are kind of squishy, and it's got 2 attacks. Its first attack, Repulsor Axe, costs a fighting and a colorless, does 60 damage, and during your opponent's next turn, if this Pokemon is damaged by an attack, even if it's knocked out, you place 8 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. And then Power Stomp costs 2 fighting and a colorless, and does 200 damage. You have to discard 2 energy from this Pokemon. If you need to hit for fighting weakness, I mean, I guess Iron Boulder EX does fulfill that role. I could definitely see playing 1 Iron Boulder in your deck, because I think that Iron Boulder is probably a more reliable way to hit that fighting weakness than the Iron Treads with the Future Booster Energy Capsule attached. And if you have 3 damage buffs, you can Repulsor Axe, right? And 1-hit KO and Iron Hands EX. And then, place 8 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon if they want to swing into this Iron Boulder EX again. Also, knocking out things like Charmander or other basics with Repulsor Axe is really good, because placing 8 damage counters on a big attacking Pokemon can make it easier for you to return KO that Pokemon the following turn. So I do really like Repulsor Axe as an attack. I think it's kind of solid, actually. And with Escape Rope leaving standard format, pushing around Repulsor Axe is going to be more difficult than it was previously. Iron Boulder EX has earned a standard 6 out of 10 in my book. Bianca's Sincerity is a new supporter card that heals all damage from one of your Pokemon that has 30 HP or less remaining. This is not a very good card. Professor Turo Scenario is just the premier healing card right now. Cheryl was the premier healing card before that. Bianca's Sincerity is way too conditional to ever be a serious consideration in competitive decks. It is bulk out of 10. Buddy Poffin, Buddy Poffin, Buddy Poffin. A new item card from Temporal Forces that allows you to search your deck for up to 2 basic Pokemon with 70 hit points or less and put them onto your bench. The Pokemon Company couldn't just let go of Battle VIP Pass, could they? Buddy Poffin is a great card for setup decks, a great card for Lost Box decks, any deck that wants to get little guys out. Buddy Poffin is going to see play in that deck. And it's not quite as toxic as Battle VIP Pass was, since you can play it on turn 2. Holy moly. You mean if I miss it on turn 1 and then I draw into Buddy Poffins later, I can play them? That's crazy. This card is going to see a ton of play in Standard and Gym Leader Challenge deck. This is the new standard for searching your Pokemon out in any sort of deck that plays Pokemon with 70 hit points or less. It is limited in that it can't do things like search out Radiant Greninja in your Gardevoir EX deck to start drawing cards. It can't search out Rotom V to use Instant Charge and start drawing cards in your Charizard EX deck. So players are going to have to learn how to adapt their strategies to accommodate for Buddy Poffin, but that is something that every single player in Standard format will be doing, because this card is just that good. It is, in my opinion, the best card in the set, earning a perfect Standard 10 out of 10 and Gym Leader Challenge 10 out of 10. Cryptomaniac's Deciphering is a new future supporter card that allows you to search your deck for 2 cards, shuffle your deck, and put those cards on top of your deck in any order. This effect has been printed in the Pokemon TCG before in the form of Mallow and also Oracle. I am not a huge believer in this type of consistency card. I think it's okay, but putting cards into your hand is always better than putting them on top of your deck. I understand that there are combinations that allow you to draw into the cards that you just stacked. Obviously, Cryptomaniac's Deciphering pairs really well with Kirlia. You can pair it with Radiant Greninja. You can pair it with Bibarel. Anything that allows you to draw cards off the top of the deck, Cryptomaniac's Deciphering can help you to get the exact cards you need when you need them. However, this card is not very good at the beginning of the game when you're trying to set up your board, unless you happen to already have a Radiant Greninja in play. But if you want to go get Radiant Greninja into play, Cryptomaniac's Deciphering is not going to help you do that. In fact, in the older formats where Oracle was played, that format was extremely slow and methodical. So at the beginning of the game, if you opened with an Oracle in your hand, you could afford to just play Oracle to go get a better supporter, put it on top of your deck, and then draw into that next turn. That kind of thing happened all the time back in 2004 because the game was slow as molasses. We don't live in that reality anymore. You need to have a solid turn 1, solid turn 2. Everything needs to be flowing, or you're going to get Iron Hands to the face, okay? Iron Hands to the face. That's what's happening to you if you don't set up instantly. So I am not a huge believer in Cryptomaniac's Deciphering because it requires that you already are set up, and then it can help you to get whatever you need. I think at best, this card gets played as a 1, maybe 2 of in some decks like Gardevoir. And for that, I'm going to give it a middling 5 out of 10. That's right, 5 out of 10. I'm a hater, don't care. Up next, we got Dangerous Jungle, a new stadium card that is essentially a reprint of Virbank City Gym. Virbank City Gym was played a whole bunch during its time in the black and white era of the Pokemon TCG alongside Hypnotoxic Laser. This Dangerous Jungle stadium card reads, during Pokemon Checkup, put 2 more damage counters on each poisoned Pokemon, except any darkness Pokemon. You could play Dangerous Jungle with Brute Bonnet and Ancient Booster Energy Capsule to deal an additional 3 damage to your opponent's Pokemon between turns. And then with Radiant Hisuian Sneasler, that's an additional 5 damage, which is pretty crazy. You know, maybe the ancient Dino decks that we've been talking about during this review, maybe they'll play Dangerous Jungle as their stadium, and maybe they'll play Brute Bonnet and Ancient Booster Energy Capsules and do extra damage that way. That would be pretty cool. I do really like this stadium, and I really like the ability to do more incremental damage throughout the game. Boosting your damage output has always been good in the Pokemon TCG, so I expect this card to see a healthy amount of play. This card definitely has potential, but I'm not exactly sure where it fits quite yet, so I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 10. Emergency board, new skateboard card just dropped. That's pretty exciting, except this card is not nearly as good as the last skateboard themed card that was released, a skateboard. Emergency board makes it so the retreat cost of the Pokemon that this card is attached to is 1 colorless less, but if that Pokemon has 30 HP or less remaining, it has no retreat cost instead. So if your opponent just misses a knockout, just barely, you get free retreat with emergency board. Otherwise, it gives the Pokemon it's attached to 1 less retreat cost. This could be good in decks that, you know, have single energy retreaters, like maybe Lost Box decks or anything where you want to continuously retreat Pokemon that only have a single retreat cost. But in decks like that, you already have Beach Court, which you could be running. So the uses for emergency board, I think are kind of narrow. I don't love this card. It seems okay, but it could definitely see play in decks that want to retreat often with single retreat cost Pokemon. This thing gets a 5 out of 10. Aries, a new supporter card that makes it so your opponent reveals their hand. Choose up to 2 item cards you find there and discard them. Holy moly, this thing is going straight into control decks. Snorlax Stall. Wow. And absolutely nowhere else. I think this card is perfect for Snorlax Stall, but that is about it. Really, any control deck might want to play Airy, but most decks will never consider playing this card. It is very good at doing exactly what it does, though. It can discard those switch cards out of your opponent's hand so that they cannot escape Snorlax's block ability. Previously, decks like Giratina V-Star could just hoard a bunch of switch cards in their hand, but with Airy, you can hunt down those switch cards, discard them, and make your opponent suffer. Snorlax Stall has proven that it is a regional winning caliber deck, so I think that Airy deserves a 7 out of 10 since it is a very good control card. Explorer's Guidance is a new ancient supporter that is effectively a reprint of Hapu with the ancient tag. It allows you to look at the top 6 cards of your deck and put 2 of them into your hand while discarding the other cards. This is a very expensive cost. You only get to keep 2 of the 6 that you look at. Most players would probably rather play Iono or Professor's Research so that they get to keep the next 6 cards or the next 7 cards. Explorer's Guidance, I mean, could be useful for getting cards into the discard pile, but then again, so is Professor's Research, and I really just prefer Professor's Research to Explorer's Guidance for that reason. Explorer's Guidance does have the ancient tag though, so it will always be useful if there is other ancient support to go alongside Explorer's Guidance. All in all, I don't think the supporter is that good, and I suspect that it'll probably only see play in ancient decks, as Culberus's Experiment is kind of just the better dig card and will be legal for much of the same time that Explorer's Guidance is. So this thing gets a standard 4. Full Metal Lab, new stadium card that makes it so that all metal Pokemon, both yours and your opponent's, take 30 less damage from attacks from the opponent's Pokemon. These kinds of defensive stadiums have never really been good in the Pokemon TCG. It's more of a reactive strategy than a proactive one. It doesn't do anything when you put it into play. You just have to hope that your opponent doesn't counter it and that they have to swing into your Pokemon for less damage, which all in all is going to make it so that the cards that you're putting into your deck aren't as useful or proactive as they could possibly be, because you're depending on your opponent not countering them before they get to have any effect on the field of play. So I really don't prefer to play cards like Full Metal Lab. I don't really play them in any of my Gym Leader Challenge decks either. I think this card is a 2 in both Standard and GLC. Up next, we've got the Lawnmower 4.0 from Manscaped, Hand Trimmer. It's an item card that reads, each player discards cards until they have 5 cards in their hand. This is a very good control card, an item card that limits the amount of cards in your opponent's hand. If your opponent is playing a Lost Box deck or something like that and has amassed a huge hand, you can trim that hand right on down with Hand Trimmer. Hand Trimmer combined with Airy is a very potent combination, because if you're playing a Snorlax control deck and you use Hand Trimmer to bring your opponent's hand down to 5, then you can use Airy and pluck the remaining switch cards from your opponent's hand. So you could easily bring them from like a 15 card hand down to like a 3-card hand instantly, which is extremely powerful. So I think that Hand Trimmer is just a very strong card. The fact that this effect was printed on an item is pretty wild to me. It is somewhat balanced because both you and your opponent have to discard cards until they only have 5 remaining in their hands. But overall, this thing could absolutely destroy an unprepared opponent's resources if played at the right time. 7 out of 10, very strong effect. Type of effect that we haven't seen printed in the Pokemon TCG in a while, and the type of effect that is very good for control decks. Not really useful outside of control decks, but very good for control decks. Heavy Baton is an interesting tool card that reads, if the Pokemon with a retreat cost of exactly 4 that this card is attached to is your active Pokemon and is knocked out by damage from an attack from your opponent's Pokemon, move up to 3 basic energy cards from that Pokemon to your bench Pokemon in any way you like. It's kind of like Wishful Baton, but much worse. And Wishful Baton was not very good when it came out during the Sun and Moon era. So I don't expect Heavy Baton to see a lot of play, but it could be useful in very narrow situations. Kind of like how Experience Share is starting to see a little bit of play in Miraidon EX decks right now. There is the possibility for Heavy Baton to eventually see play in some decks, but not many. And as soon as a strategy like Heavy Baton starts to catch on in standard format, tool removal will just increase in popularity, completely negating that energy passing effect from taking place. Heavy Baton is super situational. It could see play in Gym Leader Challenge, maybe in like metal decks or any fighting decks that have heavy retreat cost Pokemon, but in Gym Leader Challenge, you already got Wishful Baton. You could play Wishful Baton and Heavy Baton so that you have 2 energy passing batons in your deck. In Standard, I'm giving this card 1 out of 10. Gym Leader Challenge, I'll give it 3 out of 10. Morty's Conviction is a new supporter card that you can only play if you discard another card from your hand. You get to draw a card for each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So if your opponent has a full bench, you can draw 5 cards. It's kind of like Zinnia's Resolve Part 2. Zinnia's Resolve did see some play as it allows you to dig deeper into your deck and discard cards, and sometimes discarding cards from your hands can be good, especially if you're trying to play energy from your discard pile or something like that. So Morty's Conviction could certainly see play. I don't think it's a groundbreaking supporter, but I see it pretty much in the same vein as Zinnia's Resolve. A supporter card that might see some play in some decks and even could be featured in some tournament winning decks, but I don't think it'll be a key component of that winning strategy. Morty's Conviction draws less cards than Zinnia's Resolve, Erica's Hospitality, and Steven's Advice because it doesn't account for the active, and for that, I'm giving it a 4 out of 10. Order Box, new item card that allows you to search your deck for up to 2 item cards. Wow! And then you put them into your hand, except your turn ends. The Pokemon Company has been printing a whole bunch of item cards that do powerful things and then end your turn, and none of them have been good, and I don't think that Order Box will be good either. So it gets a solid bulk out of 10. Salvatore is a new supporter card that allows you to search your deck for a Pokemon, except any Pokemon with an ability that evolves from one of your Pokemon in play, and put it onto that Pokemon to evolve it. And you can use this card on a Pokemon that was put into play while setting up or on the turn it was put into play. And that sounds very busy. It's basically Wally, all right? It allows you to break the rules of evolution. You can instantly evolve a Pokemon that was put into play this turn, except it's not like Wally, because Wally could get broken Pokemon into play, like Trevenant, which inflicted item lock. Salvatore can do no such thing. It just helps speed up evolution without rare candy. And I don't think it's very good because the best part about speeding up evolution is if you're putting a broken Pokemon with an ability into play. And using a supporter card to put a Pokemon into play that doesn't have an ability just seems pretty bad. So I'm giving this thing a fraud tier 3 out of 10. Mist Energy is a new special energy card that provides 1 colorless energy so long as it's attached to a Pokemon, and it prevents all effects of attacks from your opponent's Pokemon done to the Pokemon that this card is attached to. This is very strong at preventing one-hit KO effects from Giratina V-Star and Roaring Moon EX. It also prevents Devolution TM from devolving your Pokemon. It prevents Sableye's Lost Mind damage counters being placed on your Pokemon. Mist Energy seems like it could have a lot of impact in standard formats, but you have to be playing a deck where it would make sense to try and prevent any of those things in the form of a special energy. So it is a powerful effect. How much play it will see is largely based on, wherever the meta game is at any specific points. I think Mist Energy deserves a 7 out of 10 in that it provides a unique effect that cannot otherwise be easily replicated and could be useful in any metagame. Last but not least, we've got the powerful new Ace-Spec cards, complete with their new pink look. First one we're going to take a look at is the Awakening Drum. For those of you that don't know, Ace-Specs are cards that are so powerful, you can only play 1 in your deck. Not 1 of each Ace-Spec, only 1 total. So you have to select carefully which Ace-Spec best suits your strategy. Awakening Drum is an item card that allows you to draw a card for each of your ancient Pokemon in play. This Ace-Spec is clearly intended for the Dino Box or Ancient Toolbox deck and could be good at just helping you to dig through your deck. Imagine playing Professor's Research for 7 and then using Awakening Drum to draw 6 more cards. It's just a very explosive card and can give you a potentially massive hand to work with when you find it. Will Awakening Drum be stronger than a card like Prime Catcher? Not entirely sure. Compared to the future Ace-Spec, I think Awakening Drum is relatively weak, but this card will probably end up seeing play in Ancient Toolbox decks, just giving you that mid-game, late-game explosive draw that can make for some really wild plays. I'm not a big believer in the Ancient Toolbox deck, and I think that Roaring Moon EX decks will just play Prime Catcher instead of Awakening Drum, so I'm going to give this card a middling 5 out of 10. Hero's Cape is a new tool Ace-Spec that gives the Pokemon it's attached to plus 100 HP, kind of like Luxurious Cape, except it can go on any Pokemon, and it doesn't make that Pokemon give up an extra prize card when it gets knocked out. This seems like it'll be the premier Ace-Spec for stall decks like Snorlax Stall, and that deck already played Luxurious Cape, and Hero's Cape is kind of just better than that. You could play Prime Catcher in Snorlax Stall decks, but that deck already plays Counter Catcher, so why would you need a 5th Counter Catcher? Hero's Cape just seems like it would be the stronger choice for that deck. It is a little bit intimidating thinking about, a Charizard EX with 430 HP. Hero's Cape could be played in Gardevoir EX decks to give your Screamtail more HP so that it can, do a bunch of damage to your opponent's bench Pokemon. Could be played with Drifblim to allow it to do a lot more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon while not giving up an additional prize card in return. It is quite good in control decks. You can even use Airy to remove your opponent's lost vacuums from their hand so that your Hero's Cape won't easily be removed. Hero's Cape could definitely see some play in competitive settings, so I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. I'll give it 6. I'll give it 6. Master Ball was printed the first time around back in the black and white era, and it wasn't played back then. And guess what? Master Ball is still bad now. It's an item card Ace-Spec that allows you to search your deck for any Pokemon and put it into your hand. Then shuffle your deck. It's just like Ultra Ball, except You don't have to discard 2 cards from your hand in order to play it. And since it is just like Ultra Ball, you could just play Ultra Ball instead and save your ace spec spot for something more useful. Master Ball is a bulk 1 out of 10. Maximum Belt is another tool card ace spec that makes it so the attacks used by the Pokemon that this card is attached to do 50 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon EX. And as Pokemon V and Pokemon V-Star start to get removed from standard format by rotation, Maximum Belt will only get stronger as the game gets more dominated by exclusively Pokemon EX. Maximum Belt fixes a ton of math. Think about playing Maximum Belt in your Charizard EX deck, and instead of dealing 180 damage while your opponent hasn't taken any prize cards, you could deal 230 damage to Pokemon EX, which is super relevant since it will allow you to knock out pretty much all basic Pokemon EX, except for, you know, that Raging Bolt guy who isn't very good anyway, so you don't have to worry about Raging Bolt. Maximum Belt can also help you to hit that one-hit KO number at the end of the game with Charizard EX. If you're trying to one-hit KO an opposing Charizard EX and your opponent has only taken 4 prize cards, you can still hit 350 damage with Maximum Belt to fix that math. I really like this card in Charizard EX, and I think it could fix math for sure, allowing you the option to knock out basic Pokemon EXs while also giving you the option to deal big damage to opposing Charizard EXs at the end of the game. It just seems like a great fit for this archetype, which is already playing Arven. Maximum Belt can also allow Giratina V-Star to reach all the way up to 330 damage with Lost Impact, giving it the ability to one-hit KO Charizard twice in a game, which is pretty nuts. All in all, I think Maximum Belt has a ton of potential. I'm giving this card an 8 out of 10. Prime Catcher is considered by many to be the premier ace spec coming out in Temporal Forces. It's an item card that allows you to switch in one of your opponent's bench Pokemon to the active spot, and then you switch your active Pokemon with one of your own bench Pokemon. It is essentially Guzma in item form, but you can only play 1 in your deck because it is an ace spec. Providing a gusting effect and a switching effect is insanely powerful, and one of the most busted things about Prime Catcher is that you can search it out with Arven, you can search it out with Irida, and you can play Prime Catcher while also playing another supporter for turn. So you can use Iono to disrupt your opponent's hand while also playing Prime Catcher to bring up their support Pokemon like Bibarel and knock it out. And those kinds of explosive plays are going to become the norm in our upcoming Temporal Forces format. You don't have to be behind in prize cards or flip aheads on Pokemon Catcher in order to bring up one of your opponent's bench Pokemon into the active spot while playing another supporter for turn. And Prime Catcher is pretty much going to change that whole gusting dynamic in standard formats. Decks are already playing a few Boss's Orders a piece, and Prime Catcher is going to make it so maybe decks start to trim out Boss's Orders. Maybe instead of playing 3 Boss's Orders, decks are only playing 2 Boss's Orders and a Prime Catcher, and then they don't necessarily have to play Switch anymore because they have Prime Catcher. So Prime Catcher is going to definitely shape the way that decks are crafted and shape the way that people go about playing the Pokemon TCG. And because of that, I think Prime Catcher deserves a 10 out of 10. It is the default ace spec. And if you don't have any other ace specs to play in your deck, put Prime Catcher in there and you're probably going to have a good time. Reboot Pod is an absolutely unhinged, powerful ace spec card for the future Toolbox deck. This thing is crazy, absolutely wild. It's an item card that allows you to attach a basic energy card from your discard pile to each of your future Pokemon in play, period. That's it. Each of your future Pokemon in play. If you have 6 future Pokemon in play, that means that you can accelerate 6 energy from the discard pile to your future Pokemon. That's insane. Absolutely wild. And then we already saw Iron Leaves can take a lot of that energy that you accelerated into play and bring it all to itself so that it can attack. Reboot Pod is exactly what this deck needed to keep up momentum in the mid to late game, since you can use Miraidon to accelerate energy into play in the early game. Instead of having to go back and accelerate with Miraidon again, you can actually just play Reboot Pod to get 6 more energy into play. You do have to have energy in the discard pile in order to accelerate them, but your Pokemon will be getting knocked out in the early game, which will get energy into the discard pile. You've also got Techno Radar, which requires that you discard a card from your hand before searching out 2 future Pokemon, and that can help you get energy in the discard pile as well. All in all, I think Reboot Pod is such a powerful card. Its effect cannot easily be replicated in the Pokemon TCG. This is like playing 6 Dark Patch all at once, and 1 to the active, which you're not even allowed to do. So it is a wild card. To have this effect on an item is something that we've never seen before in the Pokemon TCG. Just a mass board energy accelerator. Absolutely wild. And I think this card is going to be a staple in all future Toolbox decks. I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. Neo Upper Energy is the last A-Spec card. It is a special energy that provides a colorless energy whenever attached to a Pokemon, but if it's attached to a stage 2, it is essentially a double rainbow energy. I think this card is pretty weak. Underwhelming. I mean, we look at the other insane A-Specs that we've seen so far, and a double rainbow effect just isn't quite cutting it, especially since it needs to be attached to a stage 2 Pokemon. Most other stage 2 Pokemon have other ways to accelerate energy into play. I mean, just think about Charizard can accelerate energy into play itself, doesn't need a card like this. Maybe in Torterra decks, right? If you wanted to attack with an Evo Press Torterra, you could play Neo Upper Energy so that you can use that attack. But let's be honest, if you're playing Torterra, you're probably going to be behind on prize cards, so you can just use Reversal Energy anyway. I'm not a big fan of Neo Upper Energy, as I think its uses are far too narrow, so I'm going to give this card a 3 out of 10. Oh, and that does it for the set review. Okay, thank God, we're done. I did a lot of yapping today. I mean, just so much yapping. Thank you guys for hanging out with me while we did this. I'm going to be working on building these decks as soon as I get the cards in. The cards should arrive next week, so within the next couple of weeks, we will have these decks in paper ready to build and show off on our tabletop productions. Y'all take it easy and have a wonderful day.